we're stronger together. Whether to do things alone, whether to do things with others, I think there's always room for combinations of both. But overall, I think when we can see how we've been supported by others and really appreciate that and give that appreciation back in acknowledgement, inclusion, and just, collaborations and celebrations, everything that we may achieve on our own just feels like it becomes richer and more important, more meaningful.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today, we're diving into a conversation about the power of community, creativity, and connection, and how they can transform not just our work and creative endeavors, but our lives. My guest is Michael Averill, an award-winning speaker, musician, and community builder who has spent over 20 years fostering deep connections across teams, organizations, and even entire countries, literally. He once walked 4,000 miles across Canada using music and storytelling to bring people together. His work is all about helping people move beyond the limitations of going it alone and into the magic of collaboration. In this episode, we explore why trying to do everything yourself leads to burnout and what happens when you let go of control and invite others into your vision, and how embracing community can take your work further than you ever imagined. Michael shares powerful stories from his own journey, both on stage and on the road, that will leave you feeling inspired to lean into connection in new ways. Let's get into it. Michael, thank you so much for being here. It's lovely to see you, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is great.
Yeah. I'm also excited to get to learn more about you because we met through a mutual coach. I don't know if you've worked with her, but we met through Chantel. And I'm excited to get to know more about you and your work. And so just to start us off, what do you do and who do you help with the work that you do?
Yeah, it's evolved and diversified over the years. And really, I guess when it comes down to the core of it all seems to bond between story and community. Those are very powerful building blocks that I've come to love. I think they've always been a part of my life at ground roots levels. And as I've gone through my journey as a variety of things, either as a athlete, as a coach, as a musician and a songwriter, and then a community builder, it's really been cool to observe that, and sometimes scratch my head and be like, who is there one group? I'm like, I don't know if I often don't like choosing one because I feel like there's a lot of crossover in so many. And so anyway, when I come back to that question often, it's a lot of creatives, a lot of people trying to find and express their voice, and those who are drawn to community, either to want to be a part of it or to actually begin and facilitate and foster one of their own, that they can gather people in something unique that maybe they don't see that exists in the world and they think should, and trying to figure out how to do that. So I've always loved being in the arts, particularly music and songwriting, because music has a unique advantage of starting conversations that I feel sometimes in regular speak they're more challenging. They can tend to open up different doors, and having that as an asset and an advantage in conversation, I think, just as a doorway to open up new conversations or angles, has been fascinating. So that's a large umbrella, but I love the umbrella.
I love that you're starting with a large umbrella, and it's actually I've got this like guide of questions that I loosely use to guide our conversation. And it's sort of linear, but I'm feeling drawn because of the way you answered that. Just sort of dive into the deep end of the pool, if that's okay with you.
Yay, deep end.
Yes, because there was just something about the way you said that you work with people who are trying to find and express their voice. And just something about the way you said that just opened up a deep end for me, because I was like, gosh, I just feel like everyone that I've ever worked with is trying to find and express their voice, whether they would put it into those words or not. And many of the people I work with are creatives, and they are trying to find and express their voice, through art. But even the folks I work with who would not identify as creative, I think that's like the human experience. We need, for some reason or other, to find and express our voice. And when we don't, we feel it in all sorts of physical, emotional, and mental discomfort. And I'm just curious, like, just to dive right into, like, what is your take on what is this need to find and express our voice? Like, why do we need this, or how do you experience that need? What comes up for you?
What is it all about? That's a great question. It was funny. I was thinking about something similar the other day, and it's not maybe applicable to everybody in the world, because it really depends on where you live, where this belief and practice comes from. But it it makes me think of Santa Claus.
Oh my gosh.
I was reflecting on in the cultures that grow up getting to know Santa Claus, about the idea about what you write and what, like, that, the prominence of this person, that or at least when I think of myself as a kid, the only thing I really ever remember being around or with within friends or family was that this is a person that kind of brings your annual, dreams to be in the things that we want. And you just have to write that person a letter.
Whoa.
and and there's the conditions of how you're supposed to be in the year, like if you're good or not, whatever, like, determines what you supposedly are entitled to. But it's a funny cultural thing about, especially at a kid level, that we kind of are advised and encouraged to reach out this way and really kind of demand what we want.
I've never thought about that before, honestly. Yeah.
Well, I don't know why it's just taken so long to strike me as an odd thing, but I think sometimes there's other elements of just being curious about other people and wanting to know other people. I don't even, like, does it, I wonder if Santa Claus ever receives like any letters with questions about his life, or like,
Yeah.
what does he do on the weekends, or like anything else in that degree. So in terms of relating back, relating back to the question, you'll have to actually bring me back to that one,
Yeah,
because
it was about like what is this need
the
that we
need.
seem to have as people to try to find and express our voice?
Yeah, okay, so like that's I was just laughing at that, because that feels like maybe that was an early example of how we're kind of encouraged to express our voice. It's for a certain
Right.
thing, and it's very materialistic in a way, or it can be. It
Yeah.
usually is that way. But I think a lot really is affected by what we see when we grow up. There's because again, culturally, some just don't. Some just as a practice don't really express all that much. It's kind of taught differently. Um, but it does seem later down the road that does boil up in different ways. Like you're right, it comes back to this need that there maybe becomes a lot more problems to sort through, or maybe some barriers that come through because maybe in a certain culture it's just not recommended, or certain people aren't permitted to really express. So then that feels like our we're very limited, I guess, as a person, if we felt we've never even known what that's like. So I don't know. I think there you can see, I guess I can't think of an example where never expressing has been a benefit.
Yeah.
I think there is something of an energy release in speaking about what's important to us, what's uh, maybe because it helps us get closer to what we want to be and what we want to see in our lives. That's the kind of thing that seems to make it happen or not, because if we don't, it's kind of we just take what we're given as opposed to going after what we think we could achieve.
Yeah. I got to say, I got so much from what you just shared. And I'll just share what I got from it. I completely related to what you described as like that energy release that we get from expressing our voice. I know that myself personally, when I have um, kept myself from expressing myself in some way, and that energy is bottled up inside of me, for me it manifests in physical symptoms. It manifests in
Right.
headaches, and it's very uncomfortable physically as well as emotionally. um but that your story about Santa Claus, at first I was like, but how is this related? And then I was like, gosh, this just answered everything for me, because what I took from it was, of course, we struggle with self expression, because when we are little, many of us are given this very contradictory message. Like you're sharing with this story, it's like we're told, tell us what you want. And then when you do that, you either might be disappointed because you won't receive it, or you'll be told you don't deserve it because you're bad.
Right.
And
Yeah.
woof, who wants to open their mouth again after that?
Yeah, it's very loaded.
Yeah, totally.
It's a high pressure situation. It's only once a year.
Yeah. Um, so I'm going to go back to the more linear, like taking a light step out of the deep end of the pool, but I'm guessing we'll probably get right back into it, even with this next question, which is, what led you to the work that you presently do?
Yeah. In a way, it's just been kind of a chain of events through, I guess, a combination. A lot of what I grew up and was immersed in. I was heavily involved in sports as a kid, from running to basketball, mostly track and field. And I spent a good chunk of my earlier life competing in track and field. There's a good 12 years that consumed a lot of my time. And I became a sprint hurdler. got got decent at running quickly over sticks in a circle.
Yeah.
And that afforded me some really cool opportunities to go to college and to do a lot of travel and just to meet a lot of really great people, but also just to push myself to see what my body was capable of, which was a very, very satisfying experience to always just do a little bit better or a lot better. And I had a great set of coaches along the way that really focused more so on your, not or less so on placing, but more of your personal best. So the fact that like you could go out and run another race and you beat your best time ever, like it just became such an amazing goal. And I was in a community. It wasn't just a school team; it was a club team in the city. So there were people from all schools involved in this, which actually in itself, looking back, is is quite a cool thing, because otherwise it's fairly easy to stay quite limited to that sphere and feel like that's all there is. But
Yeah.
when it opened up different interactions with different generations, with kids younger than me, but with people a lot older than me. There's people in their 70s that were still training and doing track and field at that time. And just being able to have those relationships across those levels was really special. So I think that in itself set a lot of foundations to feel like a really diverse community and what that was like.
Where was this, by the way?
In Kelowna, British Columbia, in Canada,
Yeah.
Western Canada. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's one element. I grew up around music. In terms of my dad, he was an elementary school teacher, but he sang and wrote songs, and he would invite his teacher buddies over to our house often, and my mom and him would host these gatherings. I can't remember how frequently they were. I just remember being around them and seeing people hanging around the kitchen table and playing songs and sharing food and just jamming along with each other and laughing, and that was something I always enjoyed. I never really liked to get too close to it. I just loved being
Yeah.
around that vibrancy, and felt developed quite a comfort in just being around it and hearing people in space sharing good times together. So those are some like early aspects for me. But yeah, through sports led me into college and competing there. Also, it wasn't it's kind of cool coincidence that my music kind of grew in that space for myself. I started playing guitar as a kid with my brother, so we shared
Mm.
that a lot. My dad had an influence, and he would give us instruments from time to time to tinker around with. And yeah, when I got to college, I met a club of people who worked out guitar stuff, and I didn't know much about it other than how to sound things out by ear. So more of the theory I learned in that space, and also met people from across the world who opened up my view on music and how to play. And they just kept kind of cascading. I think one thing always has just seemed to lead to more depth in my life, and that got me into a position working with this club, which if I accepted that, it meant I had to teach something, and I didn't know what I was going to teach. And I decided that maybe in preparation for that, I would pick up a songwriting for idiots guide.
Ah,
And funny enough, like it ended up locking in some really key things that I had never really realized, and it started me writing my first songs. And it was enough to just bring ideas that I was learning and enjoying to others who were in that same space, which just kind of worked. And so working with songwriters, and just I think this is where the voice comes through, is I started kind of seeing more of how fun creative exercises are just little prompts, and really just simply asking questions sometimes that are quite simple. Like, say for example, if you're hanging out with your friends and someone says, I really want to go hike that mountain across the river, the lake, or wherever it is, and I've always wanted to do it, I've never done it. And they talk about it all the time, but they never do it for some reason. And you just say, well, what are you doing tomorrow? Do you want to go together? You want to go hike
yeah.
that thing? And they're like, okay. And you go and you do it, and that becomes quite a significant accomplishment for them. And sometimes I feel that's kind of what I do. It doesn't feel overly technical or crazy, but I hear people say things that they want to do all the time, and I'm like, well, why don't you just go do it? And if do you want someone to go with you? And if I can, I'm like, yeah, that sounds interesting. Let's do this together. There's this kind of, I don't know, things tend to work easier and seem more fun when you can do it with someone else, or like there's more, I don't want to use the word accountability, but there's something just special about sharing an experience that means something with other people together.
Yeah.
But then it happens, and it always scratched my head. I was like, I wonder why that was so hard. I wonder why that seemed like a big barrier. And I actually found when I was involved with certain things like that, I got really excited about it, and it made me look for those opportunities more to work with people or just to support people. And largely because I became a singer songwriter. I worked as a personal trainer for a lot of years, but then went into the path of music full time in 2011. And along the way, just from my coaching experiences and things that I had, I started applying that to the creatives in the music community, which is like very, very do it now kind of stuff, or let's do something now, do something to get it moving. And
Mm.
that energy snowballs in a really great way, really, really fast. And so, yeah, I've always been pulled to the excitement of that. I think the energy of that is really fun to witness when someone realizes it's happening. The thing that they've
Yeah.
really wanted to do is in forward motion now, and we're going to do this together. That's been maybe kind of addictive for me, because it's just a joy to be present to and then to follow through. And it also helps me do the same. I feel like when you choose to help others do something like that, you kind of by default have to really make sure you're doing it too. Otherwise, it doesn't, your word on that isn't really super validating or strong. Or at least feel like seeing evidence of those that you learn from, that they're doing the same thing, is a very important facet of that relationship.
It sounds to me like one of the things you're helping people with is to start to move through creative resistance, or to move through that fear that can keep us stuck in paralysis, and to move through that fear and into taking action on the things that people feel in their hearts and really want to be doing. And I'm curious, like, is that a type of fear that you can help people with because you can relate to it and you've experienced it as well? Or is it something you feel like you can help people with because maybe for some reason, like, you don't share that particular fear, and uh, yeah, I don't know. What's your take on that?
Hmm. I think I think in I want to say this is probably about 20 around 2016. I don't know why this hit me so hard there, but I remember this because I wrote a song at that time. I, I I had gone to a lot of concerts, and I had, for whatever reason, this streak of, I had seen a variety of different performers who had written songs about doing things on their own.
Hmm.
And while I relate to having done what feels like, I guess I've done a lot on my own. I think we all have to do quite a bit on our own at certain times in life. But it just kind of hit me, and I started thinking about anything that I'd ever done, whether it be sports, whether it be school, whether it be life, music, any of these things. I couldn't think of one that didn't relate some other person, that didn't involve somebody somewhere along the way, that had they not been in my life, I wouldn't have been able to do that thing. Or I probably never would have been in the position to receive that opportunity, or have that little bit of guidance, or just be nudged that little bit away. So it all kind of came flooding through, that I really couldn't think of anything I'd really done that was completely on my own. and
Yeah.
and really reveled in that, and actually it just kind of intensified these things that I put in my life to help me move forward, and really circulate around being in a group with other people around a topic, whether it's say, for example, I used to have a friend that we do this from season to season, where we would meet on Mondays just to work on finances, which is stuff neither of us liked doing. Like, just keeping track of that stuff for the sake
Yes.
of being on top of it and not letting it slide. So, but it became fun for us because we had that to look forward to, and we'd also have a social part where we just update each other on our lives. Uh, there's groups that I'm a part of for the sake of storytelling, like live storytelling, because that's a muscle that I don't want to let slide as well. Like, that's something I want to regularly be in the practice of, not only doing for myself, but also hearing and learning from other people, and being in that space to learn. So I'm in a group for that. That's a one that I run on Wednesday mornings. That's a global group, and it's fascinating. And I've kept that one going for about the last 2 years.
Oh,
There's
cool.
Yeah, there's ones around speaking, there's ones around songwriting, there's ones around jamming. Like, they're all, I've realized for me that I thrive in settings with groups. And if there's anything that I really, especially stuff that I don't really like doing, uh I try to create some kind of a group experience for myself if it doesn't exist, or
Yeah.
join one that is already operating.
It's interesting. Like there is, I think, a lot of emphasis in Western culture generally on doing things on your own. And it's sort of like seen as something virtuous to be able to, well, if you can't do it on your own, you're sort of cheating or I don't know, there's something weak about it or something like that. And because of that, I find like I'll often encounter this with clients that they're really self-isolating around something that's difficult. And I know exactly what that feels like because when I'm struggling with something, I can find myself in a cycle of self-isolating and I've really got to push myself to say, "Wait a minute, like you've got a friend who you could talk about this with and
Right.
you know, it might not be comfortable talking about this with any old person, but like if I choose the person carefully, it's probably going to help me start to move out of this rut." Um, yeah, what are some of the barriers that you find, whether it's in yourself or in folks you work with or both, to actually saying like, yeah, no, it's a good thing to connect with other people about what's difficult.
Mm-hmm. I saw. Are you a fan of The Lion King, the movie?
You know, I haven't seen it oddly.
Okay.
This is like a joke within my family because they've all seen it, and I don't know why I haven't seen it yet. But anyway.
Well, they just on Disney recently released Mufasa. It's like the prequel of that movie. It's all about the main character of the Lion King's dad and him growing up. Anyways, there we just watched it, and there was a line that kind of the guide figure named Rafiki in that shares, and it's such a good quote. It was really sticking with me, and it sounds similar to what you're talking about here. Is this sentiment that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Ooh, what does that mean to you?
I relate to that big time. It's I get frustrated sometimes when I might be in certain group scenarios, or maybe there's trying to think of a good example for it. But say, okay, so say for example, if I want to put on an event of some kind, if I want to do this on short notice, if I want to say, okay, this is time sensitive, I only have maybe a month, and maybe there's reasons that make me want to do it quickly because of a change of a season, or maybe it's just like I want to get this going. I can choose to go and rent a venue myself. I can do all these things. I can take on all the promotions. I can voice things the way I want them to do, and that relatively can, if I don't have anything else going on really, I can make that happen pretty quickly, and I can get word out and I can do that up. But it's very limited to what I have in my capacity. Like there's only so much that can reach,
Yeah.
and if I'm trying to do it all, and I've done this before, it's something I've definitely had the experience of doing. There, it's really tough to be in an event if you're running it, to be having the mind to process all the things, to be present, to run the event in its entirety and the best it can be, when you're probably pretty tired from doing every other layer of it. You can do it, you can make it happen, but things will probably get missed. Like like there'll be hangups and whatnot, and then it just feels like so much is on your plate
Yeah.
that but you could do it fast. You can do it. Right.
Right.
There's something else that seems to happen, like if you want to do the same event, but maybe it's in a different venue where there's different benefits to that for any number of reasons. It might be the city's community theater. It might be something like that. There might be an opportunity to partner on a larger level, where not only would those responsibilities be shared, there's a lot more reach that can have. There's a lot more support potentially available, but you probably wouldn't be able to do it for a year. it probably at least wouldn't, that opportunity to do that would take a long time to make happen. I think it's similar for authors who either self-publish versus or looking for a publisher, where the minute
Yeah.
if you do get a publisher, it can take up to 2 years for that to even get to that level, which again has benefits. These are just questions to consider. There's pros and cons to all of it. I think it just depends on what you feel you need, and a lot of people have found great success doing the solo fast thing. And if you have the energy and you have the bandwidth and you're that kind of person to handle that, I think it can be okay. But like you said, sometimes you don't realize or you, how you might burn yourself out, and like physical symptoms might start to present themselves as a result of burning the engines too hot all the time. I've found that for myself too. I've had certain situations where I was like, okay, if I had my way, I probably would do things, a lot more solo and a lot like the way that I like to run. But I've learned that if I push that capacity, my health really suffers, and that's not
Yeah.
something I want to. That just train wrecks everything beyond that. So, at the end of the day, is that worth it? No. I'd rather enjoy that. And I remember the first time I really let go of everything on my own mentality and let others into the fold, and it was just so beautiful to watch how everything evolved in ways that I couldn't imagine, because it's not my mind, like when you open up to other
Yeah.
people's minds and their skill sets and just their support, you're freer to do other things, but it also everything just grows and can get bigger and better. And I guess that's the far distance. Things can reach farther. They can reach beyond people that you don't know personally. And that's, I think, where that idea of the far can really become quite exponential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, what you're talking about right now, it just makes me think about this idea of letting go of control, which can feel really scary, whether it's
Hmm.
letting go of sole control of, I don't know, keeping track of your finances and like working with an accountant, or whether it's letting go of sole control of writing a song and opening yourself up to a collaboration, um, letting go of control of self-isolating and opening up to interacting with other people. And like, you can't control how that's going to go. There are plenty of legitimate things to be scared of, and legitimate reasons why we might want to hold tightly to control.
Hmm.
But as I think you're saying, there's just so much magic that we could never engineer on purpose that happens, or that can happen when we loosen the grip and allow the alchemy of collaborations and bringing in other people to happen.
Hmm. Yeah. And you're right. I think it's a it can be a fearful thing because it doesn't always work out great. Like
True.
it's like any relationship experience of, you have to test some, you have to test them to see how they work out, and ones that really do, you keep very close to your heart, and other ones, it's like, well, we tried, and it didn't work out so well, so maybe not next time.
Right.
Depends. I don't know. It depends. That's another kind of aspect on the end. I think things inevitably will go wrong for everybody at some point for anything. And I think it just depends on how you move beyond that. It's can you take that as a chance to grow and get stronger? And maybe there is a chance to learn and keep going and try again with the same team or people, or if the willingness is there, and that can be really magical. I think that's actually a really great opportunity. But sometimes it's not. But I think that's kind of it's part of the tools, I guess, of making any of these things happen, is you can't be afraid to try. And I think it's a disservice to not think about how that could be better the next time with the people that were involved, and then recalibrate from there.
I wonder if there's any story from your own life experience in particular that you'd like to share, that's like an example of when things go, when magical things happen that like you couldn't have engineered or come up with all on your own.
Mm. Well, there's so it makes me think of at a time when I was traveling out to the west, very very coastal Vancouver Island. There, when I was living in Vancouver at the time, I didn't have a car, and there was a performance opportunity out on this beautiful location, this little town called Tofino, which is the place really in Canada where people go to surf.
Mm.
It's gorgeous. Like it is just the most lovely place you can go see. And if for anyone interested in surfing, it's especially in the summer, it's very gentle and there's no coral reef or anything. It's like just a beautiful place. So a lot of people go there. And when I got the opportunity to go perform there, I was like, this is amazing. I can't wait. But it was quite a lot to go there, not having a car. It was if you had to take the bus, a ferry, and another bus, it was like an 8-hour day of travel. And they didn't have a sound system at the venue, so you would have to bring your own. So not only that long day, I was carrying a sound system that was portable enough that I could carry, but it was on my backpack, it was in my hand, I had my guitar, all of it. So on one of these times that I went out there, I had three different shows booked for that time, and I was renting a sound system, and it was the only time, for whatever reason, when I rented the sound system that they didn't check to see if it was working well and like all in good order.
Yeah.
And sure enough, when I get to the first place that I'm supposed to play, the sound system doesn't work.
Mm.
and it was not only was that an element going, it was that same day that I went on that trip, I also lost my voice.
Oh, wow.
So now I have 3 days to go play in two different venues with no voice and a sound system that doesn't work in a very, very tiny place where virtually there just is no resources available in terms of places you can rent from or any of that kind of stuff, or at least so I thought.
Yeah.
So thankfully, the first venue that I played at that first night, they had an extra sound system that I could use. And I just thought I had seen some other people in the past just do more instrumental style shows. And I thought, you know what, I've never really done this before, but I guess this is my night to try. So even just thinking back to others I had seen, this to me feels like that's a benefit of it didn't feel like my own. I had witnessed this somewhere else. I felt like I had learned from seeing other people do this before. And I got through that night. Like I was able to just play the instrumental. It was challenging because I had to stretch my mind and abilities differently for 2 to 3 hours of playing, which is not
Wow.
a normal thing. I usually rely on my voice, but you got to make do with what you're in the moment. I felt fine, other than I didn't have my voice. Like I wasn't sick, but it was just gone. But at least I got through that night. And so the next night, I was wandering around this other small town, and I went into this really random shop that sold laundry machines and dishwashers and radio equipment and like it was just this random place that had kitchen stuff and all these things. But they also had this section of guitars in the back,
Huh.
which was odd. And so I went in and I looked, and sure enough, they ended up having this sound system that looked like it was from the 1970s,
Oh, wow.
just old and big and heavy, and it crossed my mind. I was like, well, I don't know if I have any other options, but I asked. I said, hey, can you rent the system? And the guy says, well, we normally wouldn't, but we could. And so I share a bit of what's happening, and he's like, okay. So he works out a deal with me, and I'm taking this like charter bus to go places, and I'm also carrying this like dead weight system that doesn't work. And I'm like, there's no way I can carry this amount of stuff on the bus, because there's like multiple speakers and this other thing, and it weighed like 60-70 pounds. And so I just said, hey, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to get this there, but there just happened to be another guy in the store looking around that was a friend of the owner, and the guy just waves at his friend. He's like, "Hey, you going up to Tofino today?" And he says, "I can." and he's like, "This guy needs this sound system up at Jack's Pub," and so he's like, "All right." So I'm like, "Okay, I guess this is what's happening. This sound system is going with somebody that I don't know, and I'm renting this thing." So I'm like, I hope it ends up there. They seem, it was like you're talking about trusting yourself. It's also trusting
Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
This was all just unfolding, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's do this. I still don't know how I'm going to sing, because for the next 2 nights, I have, each night is another 3 hours, and I'm
Oh, wow.
currently on my own. So anyway, I get on the bus, I get to that town, and on my way to the hotel, which is also where the venue is, I I passed by this restaurant called the Schooner, and it's this really nice seafood restaurant type of place, just not far from the water. And this guy comes out yelling at me, and I'm like, "What the heck?" I'm like, "Who is that?" And he's saying my name, and I can't put my finger on who it might be. And so it turns out it's this guy that I met months and months ago, previous to this, at an open mic that I hosted in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And he recognized me. He knew me. He lived there, and I knew him as a solid musician. And he was working at this restaurant, and it just clicked on me. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "Are you free tonight? Like, can you come help? Do this
Yeah.
show with me? Like, I have to fill this time, but I literally physically I can't." And he's like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen." So all of a sudden now I have support. Now have that load
Yeah.
has been cut in half, which just takes a huge weight off my shoulders. So I have that confirmation he's going to show up. I get to the venue, the sound gear made it. All these things happened,
Hmm.
and we ended up doing this show together that evening, and he took the first half, and my voice was okay to do a few songs, and then I could do a little bit more instrumental, but it got through that night. It just, like, it was enough to get through.
Yeah.
And then the final night, he wasn't able to come the second time, but by that time my voice had recovered enough, and it felt like it actually was completely okay to do completely on my own then. But, like, had I not had him and that sound system and all of that stuff, like, there's several moments along that trip where that just kept happening, having that support from people along the way, that it wouldn't have been possible. I would have had to cancel everything, lose all of that, the money and whatnot that would have come from that, but also just disappoint a lot of people that were, like, relying on me being there and that whole process. So that's a fun one to remember for sure.
That is quite a story. And as I was hearing you tell this story and kind of like living it through you, you painted such a picture of this whole experience. Um, for me, it kind of like tied together many of the threads that we've talked about so far, because I thought, gosh, this is a story about the power of asking for what you want so that you can move out of stuckness to find your voice and express your voice in the way that you need to be a part of the energy flow of the world. And then I was thinking about like the Santa Claus story and all of the experiences that we have in life that teach us to be afraid to ask for what we want, be afraid to find our voice and express it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that help you or have helped you move through that fear?
I think the word that comes to mind is possibility. I think when you can get your mind wrapped around the idea that there's more than one way things can go,
Yeah.
is a big deal, because in that sense, like, had I woke up that morning, even just with my voice feeling a little bit off, in that case, I could have just said, "Oh, it's done, cancel it. I'm not going." Just shut all that stuff down, as opposed to just sitting with that same instance in that moment of being like, okay, this situation is in crisis right now. What could be done? What is possible? I guess in another universe on that side of things, I could have thought more about other people I knew in Vancouver and say, hey, I know this is last minute, but if you want 3 days of well-paying gigs and fun adventures ahead of you, and you can take that time, like I could have sent that opportunity off to about 3 or 4 people that I felt I trusted that could do it and would be able to do it, which would have been a nice thing. One, for the venues to not miss out on having a performer that they'd promised people. Two, it gives a new opportunity for somebody that I care about, that I feel is going to do a great job at what I do there. And I've always found that there's good karma that comes back from that, of like trying to make sure the thing doesn't just die there. At least that energy carries forward with somebody other than you. If you can't do it, that's one way. But also looking at, okay, again, assessing that, I'm like, I don't feel sick. I don't feel like I'm going to affect other people. I think this is like, it was a muscular thing that I was a bit just fatigued. But I'm saying, well, how else can I show up here and still provide everything that's being looked for? And who knows, sometimes you might find a new solution, a new opportunity, or maybe even a way to do it better that you may carry forward as a new norm, or something that you actually are able to call back on in the future that you wouldn't have discovered any other way. So I think it's what's really, really cool. It's even fun just to draw it on a piece of paper, this scenario. I like calling this story stemming. Yeah, I think it's if you imagine yourself as like a dot, and then whatever, say in this case, it would be traveling to Tofino for performance. That is the other dot. That you can draw, like you can connect those two dots by one line. That's one of the stems. That's just one of these opportunities. So I can tell that story. I can see that playing out in a certain way. I could tell that story from another perspective. I could look at another angle of that. There's other things I could share, which is basically creating another dot from me to that situation. And in a way, you can look at that in anything you do, anything you kind of share with anybody when you're telling a story. There's many angles that you can speak to it from. It's particularly evident, I think, for speakers or people who speak in public, where they may have a kind of key story or like a signature story, but when you go and present it over at this place, it's the theme of that night is about hustle. And over here, it might be about empowering community. And over here, it might, like, they're very different dots.
Yeah.
But I always feel like there's always a way, no matter what, to connect those with different with different stories. And I feel like we can kind of see into the future this way too. I think if that's looking, I've never really thought of it that way until now, but like I usually think about it, stories that have happened to us, we can tell from many different ways. But when we're in a situation and we're kind of faced with how something can go, we can also see it that way too. It's like, how many possible ways can this go? And that's more empowering than just feel like this is already a failure, this is done. And that's where things become really fearful, or like maybe that becomes crippling because you don't see a way out. And I know, having worked with, this is kind of more of an extreme scenario, but having worked and spoken with lots of people that deal on mental health sides of things, when it even comes to levels of suicide, say, for example, like a lot of the times that in that moment is not seeing another option. It's not seeing any other situation that things can be better. But the benefit of maybe talking to somebody at that moment is just to help acknowledge through that moment that, hey, there is some support here, there is something else, or even just to be here with somebody else in this moment is another option. And that might be long enough to make it through that really difficult time, to then feel that, okay, I can go this other way, there is another path. So yeah, I've had a number of those scenarios for myself, and then witnessing even the extremes of what I just said in other people. And it seems that anything that opens up that scope to see
Yeah.
anything else really diffuses any of the, not maybe not all of it, but can take the anxiety or the fears down quite a bit, to bring you to a point where then you can make a choice to go forward in whichever way feels best at that time.
I think that, that is such a powerful analogy. Like when someone is considering taking their own life because fear has come in so strongly that we only see things in black or white, and there's only success or failure, or there's only, two ways that things can go. It's such a powerful analogy to creative fear. And when we are in creative fear, it's only, we're going to succeed one way or fail. Um, and as you're saying, just simply connecting to one other person, simply even just describing the fear you're experiencing to one other person can start diffusing that, melting that. And then in that diffusion, there's so many infinite ways that things can go.
Yeah.
And that is so much more alive and so much more creative.
Yeah. I guess the part where I think about that scenario is when once those possibilities are seen, that sometimes can be overwhelming because there's so many. But I think what's one thing that I've always really enjoyed or appreciated is just pick one. Just pick
Yeah.
one. Don't worry about the others. If like
Yeah.
pick the one that feels maybe the most exciting, the most interesting, the one you're most curious about, and you could always come back and try another one. Like
Yeah.
afterwards, if there's so many. But I think that little moment is quite crucial. I think when you see something and you just think, okay, this one feels the best, let's go forward. And you know that you put that energy to good use.
Yeah. Makes me think of a line. Another guest I had on this podcast once shared this line with me is choose and move. Choose and move. Kind of simplifies it down.
Yeah.
We're coming close to the conclusion of our conversation, but I do have three final questions I'd love to ask you.
Sure.
And the first of those is, if there is a soapbox message that you are passionate about sharing through all the various work that you do, what would that message be?
There's a couple. I'd say this comes from a good friend of mine in Eastern Canada named Wendy Keats. This is a song I wrote for a birthday request to have a song written for her for her 60th birthday. Is that we're stronger together? That's a major one that I think highlights nicely what we've been talking about, in whether to do things alone, whether to do things with others. I think there's always room for combinations of both, but overall, I think when we can see how we've been supported by others and really appreciate that and give that appreciation back in acknowledgement, inclusion, and just collaborations and celebrations, everything that we may achieve on our own just feels like it becomes richer and more important, more meaningful, and that all of that is worth taking the time to do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree. We are stronger together. And if there's someone listening to this conversation and they are maybe in a place where they've been kind of just trying to go it alone, do things on their own, they're burning out, they're seeing some of the wisdom in what you're sharing, and they may be considering taking a chance on opening up to community, to collaboration, to bringing others into their process, whether it's a process of writing songs or building a business or doing whatever it is that their heart wants to do. What words of encouragement would you have for that person if they are feeling a bit overwhelmed by the fear, the too many options? What words would you offer them?
It's totally okay to pare down. I think maybe sometimes the overwhelm can be from having too many commitments and or maybe overextending. I think a lot, if you have lots of listeners here that are solo entrepreneurial people, it's a very common thing for all of us to extend a lot. And I say this just because this is something I made an active decision in 2 years ago I had to really open up space. And to do that, you can only open up spaces by cutting certain things out. And so just evaluating what's not a right fit anymore, or better yet, it's like, what are the best of the best, the things that really refuel your tank, really, really are important to you. Keep those ones. And if you can step away from the others, then do it, like to give you that time. And it's not a fast process. Like for me, it took about 1.5 years to really let go of certain levels of that to actually create the space for what I want now. So now that I have it, it's been like, okay, I intentionally built this, and that feels really special. So it can be done. You can do it. And sometimes it's hard to maybe let go or walk away from certain groups or certain commitments, but they also can be seasonal. It doesn't have to be forever. I think sometimes you just need to step back from certain ones and gain new perspective, or just be out of a certain kind of conversation so you can actually kind of fill your cup with new ideas. To, if you do return, you're coming in with maybe a healthier perspective for yourself, or something that's better serving for not just you, but everybody in that space. And again, yeah, it's okay to not go back as well. Like new things emerge for everybody, and everything kind of has its own lifespan. So there's very, very few commitments and things that are forever. I think that's
Yeah.
okay. That's a good thing to be at peace with.
Thanks for those words. I really relate to that at this particular moment in my path with my business and my coaching practice. That rings so true. You do have to make space for the things that you really want to make space for. Um, and finally, where can folks find you, and what is it that you've made space for? What can folks reach out to you for? What are you offering these days?
Yeah, I'm very excited about it, just because I have been redeveloping that right now to be more than me being the traveling musician guy, which I did a lot of, particularly between 2011 to 2020, mostly between 2013, 2020. I walked 4,000 miles of Canada with a tour that I did through every province and territory except one. And that was a big learning experience in a lot of ways, about the country, family, community, health and wellness. A lot of it using music, all was integrated in this experience. And that's the book I've written. I've just finished writing, and I'm just going
Oh,
through the
wow.
editing processes about that. And that book will be called Take the Time, and which was actually a song that my dad wrote, one of the first songs that he ever wrote.
Hmm.
So all of that to say, that's really merging nicely right now with the move that I wanted to do, not only more speaking and more community development work outside of the music world, whether it be with businesses, organizations, teams, really looking at the internal and external worlds of how their communities function and how they could be fostered to have more human connection, just more vibrancy. If there's people out there wanting to start up communities, that's something that I can help be a spark for. Or if they've been running them for a while and they need to spice it up, that's something I can come in and work with and help that grow to a different level. And really, again, it's the same thing I do with songwriters, is just really get into the nitty gritty of what would be exciting for you to say here. Like, what would be great for you to do? What would you actually love to be able to say that your community stands for or does or is doing. And let's figure out how we can make that happen and how to integrate some fun ways of doing that. So that's the kind of work that I've been really, I wanted to create space to be able to do more and actually have the materials and the system and the structures to support that and just clear that time. So yeah, I've made myself more open and here to collaborate with people who that works for. I still work with the songwriting community with a podcast that I have called Write Songs You Love, and a number of workshops to keep that going. That's been very near and dear to my heart. That will never go away. But yeah, bringing the principles that particularly music and all the other community experiences I've had into other spaces that may not have approached them this way or these ways is very, very exciting. So yeah, just at my website, michaelaverill.com. That's AVERILL. That's where I've got all these new happenings coming through and showing up. And yeah, I'm just thrilled to be. That's actually how I met you. That's how I met you through the conference of doing more speaking and showing up online at the Conscious Business conference there. And yeah, so more of that coming down the way, and just collaborations with communities of all kinds in the local, regional, and eventually international levels.
Fantastic. Yeah. So if listeners are looking to build communities or amp up a community that they've already built, spice it up again, I hope that they'll reach out to you. And Michael, thank you so much for taking this time and having this conversation with me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and learn more about what you do. I hope to chat with you again soon.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate being invited. And yeah, it's such an honor to learn more about the kinds of work that you've done and how multi-passionate you are, and what you've brought into one sphere with what you're doing is really beautiful. So yeah, thanks for the work you do.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing, and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.